Airbnb has a problem.
Imagine after checking into your Airbnb, you get this feeling that you're being watched. Your gut might be right.
Police have seized thousands of images from hidden cameras at Airbnb rentals, including people's most intimate moments.
They had sex and you recorded that?
Took some screenshots.
They are trying to keep it secretive. And if everyone knew what was happening, they would not be using their website.
Airbnb will have to abide by the city's new rules on short-term rentals.
What we don't want is outside investors buying up dozens of homes and apartments to turn them into full-time, year-round Airbnbs with no permanent residence.
Airbnb didn't create this, it didn't start the fire, but it's adding fuel to the fire.
Hernandez alleges that Airbnb dissolved that team last year and weakened its policies against extremist and hate groups.
For society, it's not great.
Okay, actually, a lot of problems. But how did we get here?
This video is sponsored by Aura, but more on them later.
In October of 2007, two roommates and aspiring entrepreneurs, Brian Chesky and Joe Gabia, needed a way to make some extra money while they came up with their big idea. So in hopes of making some short-term money, they decided to blow up an air mattress in their living room and rent it out as a bed and breakfast. In 2008, Nathan Bleharjic joined the team and they put together a website to host these short-term rentals, which at the time they called airbedandbreakfast.com. It wasn't initially supposed to be their big idea, but as they continued to develop it, it began to make more and more sense as something that could actually work as a big business idea. They tried to aim their advertising campaigns at certain events that were going to lead to an influx of travel in certain cities. However, this was not quite cutting it and they needed to make some money. So they decided to lean into the breakfast part of their business at the time and take advantage of the 2008 presidential election by making cereal based on the two candidates, Cap'n McCain's and Obama-O's. As stupid as it might sound, they used this to attend the Democratic National Convention and sell them there, which ended up being a huge hit, and they raised $30,000. I'm not even fucking kidding. Off of fucking Obama-O's. This was a huge win for the company. And this outside-of-the-box fundraising method ended up convincing investors to actually give them even more money, which they used to promote their site because they largely already had it built. And by 2009, the site had 10,000 users and 2,500 listings. At this point, they shortened their name to Airbnb because at this point, they were renting out entire houses and apartments, not just air mattresses on the living room floor of someone's house. And they didn't want to confuse people with that part. Going forward, they saw exponential growth year over year. And at this point, it's the Airbnb that we know and love, or maybe hate today. Now, while this video is a critique of the bad aspects of Airbnb, which there is a lot of, I want to be clear that it's not all bad. First of all, the company came in and obstructed the hotel industry, which is notoriously expensive and monopolized. Hotels have so many amenities, which is nice, don't get me wrong, but you get charged up the ass for those amenities with fees. And you might not even be using them all, or any of them for that matter. And it's not like you have a lot of options either. Sure, there are literally thousands of hotel brands, but for the most part, it's really only 6 parent companies that own all of those hotel brands. I don't think I've ever been to a hotel, except for maybe one, that was not owned by Marriott or Hilton. My point is that these hotel companies hardly faced any competition until Airbnb came in. Plus, I mean, hotels are kind of boring, right? You're going to a hotel and you're staying with your fucking family of 4 in a room with only 2 beds and maybe one, you know, shitty ass pull-out couch where you can feel it's a thin ass fucking pull-out couch. You can feel the like metal on your back the whole night. Don't even think about sleeping on your side on that thing, or you will feel it literally piercing into your body because of how fucking thin that mattress is. When Airbnb first came around, it created a place where for a cheaper price, you could get an entire house to yourself, or if you're going with your family, everyone gets their own room. They get the ability to spread out and actually settle into a nice place on your vacation. You get so much more privacy. And sure, you could get that at a hotel, but the average person can't afford to get a hotel that's that fucking nice. Airbnb provided a place that actually everyday middle-income people could afford to stay in a place like that, and that's awesome. Sure, you might not get a shitty free breakfast every morning, but hey, you have an entire fucking kitchen and full-size fridge where you can prepare food and store groceries, and it just overall feels more like a home, allowing you to actually settle in a little bit deeper on your vacation and feel almost like a local in some ways. And on top of that, you're not giving your money to some greedy hotel parent company CEO, right? It's going to some middle income guy who inherited his mom's house and decided to rent it out as an Airbnb for some extra income. Now, of course, there is a lot of exceptions to that, and we'll talk about that later. Don't even worry about it.
Airbnb can sometimes be unsafe and sketchy, but in today's world, no matter where you are on the internet, you are at extreme risk. Every website, even the ones you trust, even the one you're on right now, collects and sells your data. No matter how safe you think you are online, your data is out there, likely being sold on hundreds of different public websites without your consent, leaving you vulnerable to stalkers, hackers, and scammers. And while these sites legally have to remove your data if you request them to, they intentionally make this process super difficult and confusing. Thankfully, today's video sponsor Aura is here to help. You see, Aura will automatically search every data broker and will, on your behalf, without you lifting a finger, will request to remove your information, and it will make sure that it stays removed. If you did this manually on every single one of these sites, it would take forever. Aura does the hard work on keeping you safe, so you don't have to. But it's not only removing your data from data brokers. Aura has so many features that are here to keep you safe. From the built-in password manager, to a VPN, to an antivirus software, to even spam call and message protection. It also gives you protection from identity theft and financial fraud, with so many useful features that if I listed them all right here, right now, we would be here all day. I genuinely can't recommend Aura enough, and I unironically have found myself almost promoting it to my friends and family in my real life after my previous collaborations with them, because there's genuinely just so many features that I think are genuinely necessary to keeping yourself safe online. If you don't believe me that your data is out there publicly, and you don't believe me that Aura is actually as useful as I say, then I would highly recommend you just give it a shot. If you go to aura.com/dakotatalks, you can get 14 days for free. And in that 2 weeks, you will see how much your data is truly out there, and also all of the other awesome features that they have available. Then after that, you can decide if it's worth the $15 a month. All right. Now back to Airbnb.
My point is, though, that this company provided some very necessary competition to the hotel industry and gave consumers a more affordable and comfortable way to stay somewhere while they're traveling, all while being a pretty lean company that really just has to list the properties and doesn't have to actually own or build any of these places, instead making their money from fees and allowing the hosts to take care of the rest. This freedom for the host, again, allows a much less monopolized version of short-term rentals and leads to you giving your money to more people that actually need it. However, because Airbnb is not a direct owner of any of the properties on their site, this largely also means that Airbnb, when it comes to regulating their hosts doing sketchy or even illegal things, can largely just turn the other cheek and say it's not their responsibility because they don't own those properties. They don't have control over their hosts. They're just giving them a place to list their properties. Sure, they're taking a fee of it and profiting profusely from it, but they didn't have anything to do with it. The host did it. That's on them. It also inevitably leads to rich investors going around and scooping up a bunch of properties so that they can overcharge people and make a big profit from their short-term rentals. In fact, this has become a very significant problem. Studies show that the majority of Airbnbs are owned by professionals, which means people that own more than 3 properties listed on Airbnb. The prevalence of this varies a lot based on your city and the regulations around short-term rentals, however. But when you have rich investor professionals going around and scooping up all these properties, it leads to a much less local and personal experience than Airbnb promises. It increases the prices, it makes communication with hosts significantly more difficult, it leads to hosts weaponizing hidden cleaning fees to hide the true price of their listing, and on top of all of that, it has a very negative impact on the housing market. This is something that Airbnb has been relentlessly criticized for, because at a time when we are in a overt housing crisis, housing prices are out of control, and one of the main contributing factors of this is the lack of housing available. The demand is much higher than the supply, and let's just say it's not super easy to save up with the cost of living in today's world. Short-term rental companies like Airbnb incentivize investors to come in and scoop up even more of the supply and then rent it out short-term, making even more of the housing not available to people who want a long-term rental or to buy a home. Now, obviously, Airbnb did not single-handedly cause the housing crisis, but it has no doubt contributed to it. A lot of cities have begun regulating Airbnb much more extremely to attempt at lessening its negative effects, some limiting the amount of properties that can be rented out per individual. Some started requiring a license to host, and some cities have made it so you can only host Airbnbs for a limited number of days out of the year, and some have just entirely banned short-term rentals. Now, a lot of these regulations have been furthered by hotel companies' lobbying efforts, because that's fucking capitalism, baby. But despite their monopolistic motives, these regulations have made positive impact. That is, when they are properly applied, because a lot of times, Airbnb hosts will just entirely ignore them or find ways to get around them, and Airbnb themselves is not very good at helping crack down on this. According to the LA Times, studies show that 45% of short-term rentals in LA are illegal in some way, whether they're misrepresenting the location of the actual rental so that they can skirt around the city's regulations. Some will input fake registration numbers, or they'll use a real registration number but for several different properties. That's just a few of the many different loopholes that you can use to get around these city restrictions. And Airbnb, from what I can tell, largely doesn't try to enforce these regulations. They have actively advocated and lobbied against them and are 100% incentivized to let it slide if they can. This failure to restrict hosts and enforce rules is a problem in many different ways for this company as well. There are a genuinely terrifying amount of examples of Airbnb hosts doing incredibly illegal and invasive things, like planting hidden cameras inside the rented property, and in some cases even murdering and assaulting guests. Now, Airbnb argues that these incidents are statistically not significant, and that when they come up, they swiftly ban people who commit these heinous acts. However, I would argue that, first of all, these things are preventable, at least much more than they currently are being prevented, and their enforcement policies after the fact are flimsy at best. As CNN reported in July of 2024, the company's website, for example, tells users they should not rely on its background checks to identify, quote, all past criminal convictions or sex offender registrations or other red flags. And even if Airbnb discovers a user has a criminal background, convictions of murder, terrorism, or child molestation are not automatic disqualifiers under the company's policy. This is an extremely concerning aspect of this company, because when you stay in someone's Airbnb, you are placing a lot of trust into that host. That host knows where you are, how long you'll be there, and has access to enter that place whenever they like to. You have to trust that they aren't hiding cameras in the fucking smoke detector right above the toilet seat. You have to trust that they won't decide to sneak in while you're sleeping. You have to trust that they are legally allowed to be renting that property, and that they even properly displayed what that property was going to look like and the amenities that you were going to be receiving when you got there. And the fact that Airbnb's background checks are this fucking flimsy, and even when they do find something insanely serious and dangerous like child molestation or terrorism, those things are not automatic disqualifiers. What the fuck are we talking? What is an automatic disqualifier if not for fucking terrorism and child molestation and murder? What the fuck are we talking about here? How can you as a guest trust the host that you've never met if the company is doing this horrendous of a job at background checking people who are allowed to host on their site? Now, the hidden camera problem is actually a much bigger deal than I initially understood. I had heard of people finding cameras in their Airbnb before this video, but I was like, oh, I'm sure it's just, you know, a few cases that the media was, you know, making a much bigger deal than it was. Not very statistically significant, and I'm sure Airbnb dealt with it very swiftly. And this is largely what Airbnb says is the case. However, there has been 35,000 customer support tickets regarding cameras in the past decade. And most people don't even find cameras when there are hidden cameras. Most people that actually are filmed on hidden cameras in their Airbnb don't find out until someone else finds it, and they are alerted by law enforcement that they have video footage of you in your fucking Airbnb. So likely that number is significantly higher than we actually even know. Furthermore, when guests do find these hidden cameras and they alert Airbnb of their existence, Airbnb will do all they can to quickly and confidentially settle these cases while also offloading their responsibility, because you sign away your right to sue them when you sign their 55,000 word terms of service. And in my opinion, it is very clear that this company is very uninterested in fixing this problem. As CNN reported, the company doesn't, as a matter of practice, notify law enforcement, not even when a child is involved. The company may, however, reach out to hosts about complaints as part of internal inquiries, a move law enforcement say could hinder criminal investigation because it gives suspects time to destroy evidence. As a CNN investigation found that Airbnb consistently fails to protect its guests, despite knowing that hidden cameras are a persistent concern within its industry. Airbnb corporate strategies, moreover, have been aimed at preventing regulation of the short-term rental market to allow the company to distance itself from responsibility for guest safety and privacy. Thousands of images have been recovered from short-term rental hosts by law enforcement. Hidden cameras placed in bedrooms and bathrooms show guests during their most private moments, changing clothes, being with their children, even having sex. This is overtly a failure on the part of Airbnb to protect its users and clearly an attempt to offload their own liability instead. With more stringent background checks, immediately alerting authorities when this happens, and a more active hand in addressing the root causes of this, the hidden camera problem would be significantly hindered. But instead, they literally spend their energy and money on suppressing and quietly resolving these cases and lobbying to lessen their regulations and responsibility. This, again, is not unique to hidden cameras though. Regardless of the issue, when governments or the public put pressure on Airbnb to crack down on its hosts doing illegal or negatively impacting things, they much prefer to just let it slide and forego all their responsibility for their hosts' actions, which at a certain point you cannot keep saying it's not your fault. If a government were to make murder not legally punishable and then people started killing people, it's on the government for legalizing that action. Yes, obviously it's also on the murderers for committing this violent crime, but there's a clear lack of care to enforce safety for the people of that society. And it's the same situation here. When we have tens of thousands of hidden camera complaints from guests, when we have profit-hungry capitalists scooping up family homes by the dozens, stealing them from the average home buyer and putting them up for short-term rent so they can charge tourists up the ass for it. When we have hosts blatantly disregarding local laws, attempting to limit the negative impact of this company. When we have nearly every single fucking host on the platform weaponizing hidden cleaning fees to make the price of their listing look significantly lower than it really is, often leaving the consumer feeling like they've been lied to and scammed. And with all of this, the way that the company goes about fixing any of this is to do a shitty background check that doesn't guarantee to find anything, and even if it does find something, it doesn't automatically disqualify murderer child molesters, and otherwise they just act like it's not their fucking fault and there's nothing they could have done. We have a problem here, and it's not the fucking hosts. Yes, the hosts are the one directly doing the illegal or harmful activities, but they are merely taking advantage of a system that Airbnb allows them to take advantage of and fails to enforce basic safety rules on. Airbnb offers something that I genuinely think is awesome: the ability to have an entire home to yourself for about the same price as a hotel, have a whole kitchen, multiple bedrooms, and significantly more privacy than you would have in a hotel with multiple people. I think that's really awesome. I also really love the idea of being able to support a local middle-income renter rather than some multi-billion-dollar parent company of a hotel. I think that this idea has revolutionized how people travel in a lot of ways for the better. However, as time has gone on, the price of Airbnbs have become much greater. Cleaning fees are becoming increasingly weaponized. The impacts on local communities and the housing markets are undeniable and clearly not being properly handled. The added privacy you get of having your own room and your own home can be entirely violated by some rogue host who wants to catch a peek at your intimate moments by hiding a fucking camera in the charger port. And even the idea of supporting people rather than massive companies is becoming less applicable, seeing as the majority of Airbnbs are owned by people with more than 3 homes, which, let's just say, if you have 3 homes in 2025, you're doing pretty fucking well. So while all of these things are certainly awesome and worth striving for, this company in their current form is far from the vision they like to promote. They have really significant issues in terms of guest safety and regulating their negative impact on local communities that they are seemingly not worried about addressing. They would rather have you agree to their 55,000 word terms of service at sign up and wash their hands of all of those issues, which is unacceptable. Am I going to continue to use Airbnb? Yeah, probably. But I'm not going to be happy about it. In fact, actually about a week after this video comes out, I'm going to be going on a trip and we already have an Airbnb booked. In the capitalist hellscape we live in today, I find that if I try to entirely avoid every immoral company that I absolutely despise, I will lose my mind, because it is nearly impossible to find a company that does not blatantly disregard and manipulate consumers and or workers to squeeze every single dollar of profit they can. However, this doesn't mean that it isn't worth advocating for change. We need better regulations on this company that are better enforced, and we need cooperation from this company. And if given the opportunity, I would stay with friends and family 100%, or even maybe a hotel, because at least then, you know, my safety is more guaranteed. I am certainly going to be a vocal critic of this company going forward, and would never recommend that anybody support them in any way. But it's not the fault of the consumer for using one of the only companies out there that rents places for you to stay on your vacation. It's the company's fault for making themselves something that contributes to and facilitates objectively harmful and illegal activity. It's the government's fault for allowing this company to get away with facilitating and contributing to this objectively illegal and harmful activity. I don't think that consumer shaming is the answer. System shaming is. System reform is the answer. All right, thanks for watching this video, guys. I actually found this to be super interesting and informative, but also very concerning, because I've stayed in quite a few Airbnbs in my day, and I have multiple trips coming up this summer that I'm going to be staying in Airbnbs at. It's already planned. So needless to say, I'm going to be checking the fucking house plants and smoke alarms when I'm there. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and check this video out next, because YouTube thinks you'll like it. Oh, and don't forget to check out Aura by clicking the top link in the description. You'll get 14 days for free, and trust me, you won't regret it. All right, I'll see you guys next time.